You're worthless. The words sliced through the air like a blade, sharp and cold. I didn't even flinch anymore when Michelle, my stepmother, hurled insults at me. She stood at the center of the grand living room in my father's mansion, draped in her favorite silk blouse, pearls resting against her collarbone like they belonged there. Her manicured fingers clutched a glass of champagne she hadn't even earned. "Only my kids deserve the family fortune," she declared, loud enough for every relative in the room to hear, and for me to feel it deep in my chest. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us, what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I was standing there in my black pantsuit, quiet, composed, but suffocating inside. She turned slightly, tilting her glass toward her daughter, Ava, who was all smug smiles and expensive lipstick, and her son Jordan, who hadn't worked a day in his life but acted like he was born with a crown. "You," Michelle spat, turning her head back to me. "You contribute nothing to this family. You're just the leftover mistake from a marriage your father regrets." And then he said it. My own father. He looked me dead in the eye, his jaw tight, shoulders stiff in that arrogant way he always carried himself when he wanted to feel in control. "She's right, Rachel," he muttered coldly. "You've been a disappointment from the start. It's time you faced that." I stood in silence. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I'd already said it all. I had pleaded with him, fought to be seen, to be valued, all of it. And I'd learned long ago that no amount of love would ever be enough for a man who decided his daughter was disposable once his second wife moved in. Everyone in the room laughed, a cruel, self-congratulatory kind of laugh, like watching a loser walk out of a casino broke. "Maybe now you'll finally stop showing up like you still belong here," Ava added with a smirk. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just looked around at the people who were supposed to be my family and let the silence grow louder than their mockery. That's when the lawyer, Mr. Carver, who had been sitting quietly near the fireplace, cleared his throat. The room stilled. He adjusted his tie, reached into his leather briefcase, and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name handwritten on the front. "I was instructed," he said evenly, "to deliver this only after that conversation happened." Michelle's smile faltered. "What is that?" my father asked sharply. Carver handed the letter to me. I opened it. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from a chilling kind of stillness inside me. I read silently, my eyes moving slowly, carefully, making sure I understood. When I looked up, my gaze went to Michelle first, then my father, then everyone else. "Do you really want to know what it says?" I asked quietly. They waited, like vultures unsure if their prey was still breathing. I handed the letter to Carver. "Read it out loud." He nodded. "To my granddaughter Rachel Carter," he began, voice steady but slow, "I am deeply sorry for what your father and his wife have done to you. I tried to intervene many times. I tried to speak to your father, but he chose ambition over blood. That's why I removed his name from the final trust distribution." The room fell silent. Michelle's face tightened. "You are now the sole beneficiary of my estate. Everything, the properties, the stocks, the trust accounts, the offshore holdings, all of it is yours." I watched as Michelle's complexion drained to white. "To your father, let this be the price of choosing a woman who saw my granddaughter as a threat rather than family. To your step-siblings, let this be the cost of laughing while she cried." Michelle dropped her glass. The sharp crash echoed through the room, but it was the fear on her face that finally made me breathe. "What?" Ava gasped. "This has to be a joke." "Check the date," Carver said. "This letter is dated 5 months ago. It's signed, notarized, and witnessed. I have the updated will." My father tried to lunge toward the briefcase, but Carver blocked him. "Touch that, and I'll have security remove you from this property, which, by the way, now legally belongs to your daughter." "My daughter?" My father spat, blinking rapidly. "She was a mistake." My voice was calm, cutting, and clear. "No. You were." And I walked out of the room. Not defeated, not broken, but beginning. The air outside felt different. Not because the temperature had changed, it hadn't, but because something inside me had. As I stepped past the marble doorway of the estate I grew up in, the one I was made to feel like a stranger in, I realized they weren't the owners anymore. I was. I had always walked that long cobblestone path as a shadow. Now I walked it as the heir. Behind me, I could still hear Michelle screaming inside, her voice shrill, desperate, as if raising the volume would undo the truth. "Rachel," she shrieked, "this isn't fair. Your grandfather was manipulated. He was sick." I paused at the fountain, turned back slowly, and stared at the windows. I didn't say a word, just smiled. Not out of cruelty, but out of closure. Because for the first time in my life, their words couldn't hurt me. 30 minutes later, I was sitting alone in my car in the circular driveway, letting the engine run but not moving yet. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because she looked different, but because she finally felt seen. I didn't drive off. I didn't need to leave anymore. Instead, I walked back in. Carver was still there, standing calm, briefcase in hand like none of the chaos had touched him. My father had slumped into an armchair, looking dazed, like the rug had been yanked out from under his very identity. Michelle? She was pacing, dialing numbers on her phone, calling lawyers or maybe therapists, or both. "Rachel," my father said hoarsely when he saw me come back in. I stopped a few feet from him. "Save it." He flinched. Michelle turned around. "You can't possibly think, Rachel. We raised you. Oh. Don't." I snapped, voice low, firm. "Don't you dare twist this into you being the victim." Her mouth opened, then shut. "I was 9 when you married him," I continued. "And from the second you moved into this house, you made it clear I wasn't welcome. You tore down my mother's photos, gave away my dog without telling me, and told Ava to call me Charity." "I remember, Michelle. I was a child, not a fool." Carver shifted slightly, but said nothing. He knew this wasn't the kind of moment you interrupted. "I didn't fight you because I thought it would make things worse," I continued, my voice shaking now, not from fear, but from release. "But here's the thing about burying pain, it grows. And one day, it stands tall enough to bury you." Michelle stepped forward. "But what about Jordan? He just turned 21. He was promised." "He wasn't promised anything," Carver interjected. "Legally, the previous will was nullified. The new documents were filed, authenticated, and sealed before Mr. Whitmore passed. Jordan has no claim." Michelle turned on Carver like a viper. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Carver blinked. "I'm doing my job, Ms. Whitmore." I looked toward the massive staircase that led to the upstairs rooms. "I want you out of this house. All of you. By tonight." My father stood now. "Rachel, be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I said, genuinely laughing for the first time in hours. "You called me a mistake. You let your wife scream at me in front of a room full of people like I wasn't even human. And now that it didn't go your way, you want reason?" His face dropped. "You're lucky I'm not having security drag you out right now." Michelle started to protest, but Carver stepped in again. "Ms. Carter has the legal right to make that decision. This home is hers." Silence. Until Ava, who had been oddly quiet for the last half hour, stepped into the room, arms folded. She looked at me with a strange mix of disgust and fear. "You were always pathetic," she said. "Now you're just a pathetic girl with money." I walked up to her, toe to toe. "Wrong," I whispered. "I'm the woman your mother warned you about. The one who remembers everything. And doesn't forget." She blinked. Hard. And I walked past her, up the stairs, into the master suite that Michelle had redecorated 5 times in 12 years, always calling it her sanctuary. It was mine now. The first thing I did, I opened the closet and threw every single one of Michelle's designer coats into a donation box. One by one. The headline hit the local news before midnight. Rachel Carter named sole heir of Whitmore Estate, stepmother evicted. Michelle must have thrown a tantrum when she saw it. Maybe she hurled another champagne glass. Or maybe, more likely, she stayed up all night trying to figure out how I pulled this off. But the truth was, I didn't pull anything. I simply endured. And waited.
And now?
It was time to act. The next morning, I sat alone in the sunroom overlooking the garden, sipping coffee I brewed myself, not out of necessity, but principle. Every maid Michelle hired was told not to serve me. So, I learned how to serve myself. And now I preferred it. Carver had sent over digital access to the full estate portfolio, 6 homes across 3 states, $11.4 million in liquid assets, $8.7 million in private stocks, and the biggest surprise, 42% stake in Whitmore Holdings, the company my father worked for.
No.
Used to work for. I picked up my phone and opened the camera. My finger hovered over the Go Live button on Instagram. I'd never gone live before.
Never needed to. But now?
I tapped it. The screen blinked. 3 seconds in, 80 viewers. 10 seconds, 500. A minute later, over 5,000. I took a long breath, then spoke. Hi, I'm Rachel Carter. You probably know me as the girl who just inherited everything her stepmother and father never thought she deserved. The numbers jumped. I never wanted the money. I never cared about the houses. I cared about being treated like I mattered. And when I wasn't, I stayed quiet. I took it. Year after year. I stared at the screen. But yesterday, something changed. Not because I got lucky, but because truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you bury it. I held up the letter. This was written by my grandfather before he died. The man who built everything my stepmother tried to hijack. The man who watched in silence while his son abandoned his daughter and decided, in the end, to do something about it. I could see Ava's name pop up in the viewer list. Jordan's too. Don't let people tell you you're worthless just because they hold the purse strings. Sometimes the purse doesn't belong to them. I ended the live stream. 10 minutes later, my phone was blowing up. Friends. Old classmates. Strangers. Even news channels. Michelle called me. I didn't answer. So she texted. You need to stop airing family matters in public. You're humiliating us. I replied with a screenshot of her yelling, worthless, in my face from last night's security footage. Just matching the energy. By noon, she and my father were trending. By 3 p.m., Whitmore Holdings board members had scheduled an emergency meeting. By 5 p.m., Carver confirmed I now had a seat at that table and voting power. Are you sure you want to attend this? He asked. You don't have to. You can assign a proxy. No, I said. I want to look every one of them in the eye. And I did. That night, in a glass conference room overlooking the city skyline, I walked into the Whitmore Holdings board meeting, wearing a dark emerald suit my mother had tailored for me years ago, the one I was told I'd never have a reason to wear. 17 men sat around that table. Only one woman. All of them turned when I walked in. Some stood. Some didn't. Miss Carter, the chairman said stiffly. We were surprised by your inheritance. I imagine so. You now control the late Mr. Whitmore's voting shares. We're here to discuss how you plan to use them. I smiled. Oh, I plan to use them. Silence. I'm aware my father is still employed here. I continued. Yes, the chairman said carefully. He won't be. There were murmurs. Raised eyebrows. I set a folder on the table. Inside are documented records of how my father used his position to secure side deals that favored Michelle's boutique chain, all while funneling resources from Whitmore Holdings vendor accounts.
Gasps.
He didn't just abandon his daughter. He bled this company. Do you have proof? One member asked. I turned to Carver, who handed out a set of files. The room exploded. And 10 minutes later, my father's employment was suspended pending an audit. The moment I stepped outside that building, the air felt different again. Because for the first time, I had the voice, the power, the proof. And I wasn't done yet. 2 days later, the first attack came, not from my father. From Michelle. It started with a news article that mysteriously went viral overnight. Rachel Carter inherited billions after manipulating dying grandfather, sources say. The source? An anonymous family insider. The image featured was cropped, taken at a moment where I looked cold, emotionless, almost villainous. exactly how they wanted me to look. I wasn't surprised. Michelle had always been a strategist. But what she failed to understand was that I wasn't the same girl anymore. And I didn't play defense. I called Carver. She leaked it, I said. Of course, he replied. Shall I begin legal action? Not yet, I said. Let's give her a little more rope first. That evening, I drove to a property my grandfather had left me, a lake house upstate.
Quiet.
Hidden. It was the last place I saw my mother before she passed away. I hadn't returned in years. The moment I walked in, I found a box marked Rachel in the old study. Inside were letters, photos, receipts, and a flash drive. When I opened it on my laptop, my heart skipped a beat. It was footage, audio, everything. Recordings of my father and Michelle, secretly captured over the years by my grandfather's estate assistant, discussing how they'd pressure him to speed up the will change, how they'd isolate me from decision-making, how they'd manipulate my grandfather's medications. I had evidence, not just of cruelty, of criminal manipulation. The next morning, I walked into Carver's office with a flash drive. He raised an eyebrow. Is that what I think it is? It's a loaded gun, I said. And I want you to pull the trigger, slowly. By noon, Michelle's lawyer received the first letter. A quiet one. A legal one. But just enough to make her squirm. By 3 p.m., I received a voicemail from her. Rachel, let's talk. We don't need to escalate this. This is still family. I deleted it. An hour later, she tried another method. I came home to find my private bedroom ransacked. The alarm log said someone had used a code, my father's old master code, which I never deactivated. That was my mistake. But what they didn't know, I'd installed motion-activated cameras all throughout the estate. I watched the playback in silence. Michelle,
Ava,
Jordan, all three of them, in my bedroom, tearing through drawers, searching for the paperwork. I watched Jordan pocket something. They had broken into my house, on camera. I called the police. By 7 p.m., Michelle was screaming in my driveway as officers placed her in cuffs for unlawful entry and property tampering. Ava and Jordan stood frozen behind her, pale, speechless. This is your fault, Rachel. Michelle shrieked. You provoked this. No, I said, stepping onto the porch, holding the flash drive in my hand. This is justice. For every night you made me feel like I didn't belong. For every slap you gave me behind closed doors. For erasing my mother's memory like she was trash. She went quiet. The officers loaded her into the back of the cruiser. I leaned toward the window. You should have stayed out of the house, you said. I'd never inherit. The footage from the arrest went viral. Again. This time, people weren't questioning if I manipulated anyone. They were cheering. Michelle's mugshot made headlines. Jordan's college revoked his pending internship. Ava's influencer sponsors dropped her. And my father? He stayed silent. Too silent. Which meant he was planning something. The calm before the final storm had arrived. And I was already building the wall that would withstand it. The night before the final board meeting, I stood in my mother's old bedroom, the only room in the estate I hadn't touched. It still smelled faintly like lilac and vanilla. On the dresser was the framed photo of her holding me at age 4. She was smiling, tired but proud. A woman who died too early, too quietly, and whose memory had been systematically erased by the people who now sat in jail cells or cowered behind lawyers. Except one. My father. He hadn't said a word publicly. No press. No calls. No statements. Until I received an envelope the next morning. Hand-delivered. Meet me at the Pines Cemetery. 4 p.m. Just us. I stared at the note for 10 minutes. Then I went.
It was cloudy when I arrived. Windy. Cold.
The kind of gray sky that felt like it was holding its breath. He stood by my mother's grave in a long coat. Alone. His back was to me, but I could see the slouch in his shoulders. The first time in my life he looked like a man, not a monument. I thought you wouldn't come, he said without turning. I didn't come for you, I said. I came for her. He turned, slowly. His face had aged in just a few weeks, lined, pale, almost unfamiliar. "You've made quite the show of this," he muttered. "Funny. That's what Michelle said when she was cuffed in my driveway." He closed his eyes briefly, as if that image pained him. "Why did you bring me here?" I asked. "To explain." I almost laughed. "You think now is the time for that?" "I was weak," he said, voice breaking slightly. "After your mother died, I didn't know how to raise you. Michelle, she made it easier. She took control. I let her." "No," I said. "You chose her. Over and over. You let her humiliate me, starve me emotionally, isolate me. And you joined in." He swallowed hard. "I thought you'd be fine. You always seemed strong." "I was surviving," I snapped. "Not thriving. You called me a mistake. Do you know what that does to a person? To hear that from the man who gave them life." He blinked fast. "I didn't mean it." "You meant it," I said. "And now, you don't get to rewrite your version of the story." He looked down at my mother's headstone. "She loved you so much. She would have fought for me," I said, my voice cracking. "She would have burned this world down if she knew what Michelle was doing. But you let them bury her memory right alongside her body." He finally looked up at me, eyes red. "What do you want from me, Rachel?" I took a breath. "Nothing." He blinked. "Nothing," he repeated. "I used to want everything from you," I said.
Love.
Acknowledgement. A seat at the table.
But now?
"I don't even want your apology. Because I've realized something."
He stared at me.
"You were never the gatekeeper. You were just the wall I had to climb." He stepped forward. "Let me at least be in your life again. Somehow." "You want to be in my life?" I asked. "Yes." I reached into my purse and pulled out a sealed manila envelope. "Then you can start by answering this." He took it with shaking hands. "What is it?" "The name of the woman you were seeing while Mom was dying," I said flatly. "The same woman who gave Michelle your office building lease 2 months before the funeral. I found the records. You weren't just weak. You were cruel." His face went pale. "You want a relationship with me?" I added. "Start by owning that. Until then, we have nothing to talk about." He looked down at the envelope, speechless. And I walked away. The final board meeting was quick. Michelle was removed as a vendor partner. Her assets were frozen. Ava's accounts were audited for fraudulent sponsorship claims. Her social media presence dropped to near zero. Jordan's college issued a conduct review. He dropped out. My father? He quietly resigned from every business board he sat on. 3 weeks later, I held the keys to the last Whitmore property, a beach house no one had visited in years. I didn't sell it. I turned it into a shelter. For girls who grew up like me, forgotten, silenced, underestimated. The plaque by the gate read, "The Second Home Project. In honor of those who never had a first." On the 1-year anniversary of inheriting the estate, I stood alone by my mother's grave. A breeze rustled the flowers I'd left. "I did it," I whispered. "I didn't become like them." And in that moment, for the first time, I let myself cry. Not from pain.
From peace.
If this story hits you even a little, just hit that like button. It helps more than you think. Don't forget to subscribe if you've ever felt this kind of pain. You're not alone.